Hello and welcome to this overview of the new 6.1 software release from Bridgetech Technologies. Now this is a major software release and it's packed with features. So let me take you through some of the more important ones in this video. Now I'm going to start by showing you a couple of slides. Now don't panic, there's only a couple, and I've basically lifted the slides from the 6.1 release notes. So you can pause the video and have a more in-depth look if you wish, or you could just download the release notes from our website. Okay, let's have a look. So we're starting with the hardware probes. The VB120, the 220 and the embedded hardware for the 330, and of course not forgetting the Nomad. Now most of these functions are included for both the hardware and software probes, but there are a few subtle differences, so let me take you through some of them. SRT monitoring is now supported across all of the probes, and the probes can be a caller, listener or in rendezvous mode. QoE monitoring is now also supported across all of the probes. Now in the hardware probes it's limited to freeze frame and color freeze, but it is across IPTV and the OTT. It's slightly different in the software probes and the appliances because there's much more functionality. We'll look at that later. Everything's been consolidated in the content tab where the thumbnail mosaic view is. Now the OTT enhancements are a little bit more difficult to get your head around because most of the changes are under the hood. The OTT engines have become more efficient, so everything runs faster and more smoothly. However, what is visible is the support for Varimatrix 4.3 DRM. And of course all of these require the OTT option. Now we've got a new module, the VB246. It's a ASI input module, and where it differs from the 242 is that all 6 ASI inputs are available for simultaneous monitoring. And we've added VB243, we've added some more support for the ASI redundancy switch. And there are a few more back office changes and improvements. The main differences for the VB330, of course, is it can't be used as a controller card like the VB120 and 220. So there's no VB246 upgrade here. Everything else is pretty much the same. Moving on to the appliances, then the software probes, and remember the VB220 is also available as a software probe. We've still got the SRT monitoring. When we've added to these probes, we've added JPEG XS support, and we'll look at that in a bit more detail later. The OTT enhancements are the same, and we can also put OTT into a timeline because the software probes support timeline in the content option, and we'll see that in more detail when we look at the demo. In VBC, the major change is that it enhances support for ST2022-7 streams, in other words, redundant streams. And again, we'll look at that in the demo later. Right, so let's get straight on with the demo itself. SRT functionality has been added to all of the probes running 6.1, hardware or software. I've got it running on a software probe in the demo system, and I'm going to show you that. But it also, of course, runs on the hardware probes. And if you want to see that more detail about SRT, then watch my video, which explains how SRT works. And I actually set up SRT running on my hardware Nomad probe. So go and have a look at that. It's on the training website as usual. So I'm going to be looking at a VB120, and I'll just show you that the tools are there to set up a SRT stream on a hardware probe, and then we'll actually look at it on the software probe. So as we go to the multicasts and we edit one of the streams, you can see that there is an SRT tab there. And this is where we will set up whether we want the probe to be a listener or a caller. So this is basically just showing you that the functionality now exists. And this is a standard feature, don't forget. It's not licensed. Anything running 6.1 has the SRT feature already added. I'll be looking at SRT in a little bit more detail when we look at the VB330 appliance. But for now, I want to show you the content tab that appears on the VB120 running 6.1. Now this of course is new to all of the hardware probes. This content tab allows you to see all of the thumbnails and also to do some QoE analysis with freeze frames. As you can see, all of the QoE functionality is summarized on the thumbnails tab. On the hardware probes, we're limited to freeze frames, and you can see on Disney Junior that we are testing for freeze frames, and because it's green of course, that the test is being passed. If you look across to the Disney channel next to it, you'll see that freeze frame is greyed out. Now, if you're familiar with Bridgetech probes, you'll know that a grey bulb anywhere indicates a test that has been switched off effectively in the threshold settings. Let's have a look at the threshold and see what we can test for. So you can see we've got freeze frame and we have the normal sensitivity adjustment for normal, seldom and often, and the color freeze as well. Now the software probe adds even more functionality, including a lot of audio tests and QoE type MOS measurements, and we'll look at that later. But for now, I want to look at a probe with some OTT. Now, as I said earlier, there's not an awful lot to see with the OTT upgrades. Most of it's under the hood and affects the performance of the OTT engines. But I just wanted to show you that we now support the Varimatrix 4.3. And if we go to one of the channels and we look at the DRM tab, you'll see that Varimatrix 4.3 is now supported. Okay, now while we're looking at the hardware probes, let's take a look at the new 246 card, the VB246. Now, before we look specifically at the VB246 card, let's remind ourselves how the 242 card works. Remember, 6 BNC connectors, so we can have 6 sources connected, but we can only monitor 2 of those simultaneously. Of course, we can still round robin, so we can actually test all 6 sources, but we can't test more than 2 simultaneously. Now looking at the 246 card, you can see, and on this particular example, that all 6 inputs are active. They've got 6 green bulbs. So this is now simultaneous monitoring. We no need for round robin testing. Here you can see on the setup screen that we've got 6 ASI streams and they're all valid and they're all working fine. Again, on the ETR290, again, just another indication that we've got 6 simultaneous ASI streams all being tested at the same time. Okay, now let's move on to the software probes. I'm going to look at the VB330 appliance. So if we look at our multicast tab and we select the SRT page, you can see that we've got SRT streams running. Look at the streams in more detail. If I edit one of the streams, you can see that I'm set up as a listener. It's commonplace for the receiver to be set up as a listener, but it's not essential. You can also set it up as a caller. Again, if you're interested in this, I recommend that you have a look at my SRT video. So as far as the probe is concerned, the SRT stream is treated in exactly the same way as any other transport stream. The video has a thumbnail and all of the pin information is there. Just a reminder that at the time of recording, with 6.1 software, the maximum number of SRT streams that we can monitor at any one time is 4. And this is across the entire probe range. So while we're here, I can also show you that the probe supports JPEG XS. If we switch to the JPEG XS page, we can see that we've got 4 streams set up. Once more, they're treated in exactly the same way. The transport streams inside the XS streams are treated in exactly the same way as any other transport stream. You can see from the very large bit rates that these are indeed XS. All of the information is exactly the same. All of the PIDs are there, and we can decode a thumbnail. It's not a particularly interesting thumbnail. It's just a locked off camera in our CAR, but it shows you that we are locked on and monitoring to a JPEG XS stream. And looking at the ETR 290 tab, we can see there they are being monitored, again in exactly the same way as any other transport stream. If we look at the content tab on this VB330 appliance, you can straight away see the difference in QoE monitoring. The functionality of the VB288 has effectively been brought across to the VB220 and 330 probes. Remember, software and appliances. As well as freeze frame monitoring on the hardware probes, we can also add audio monitoring. Now, the captions and encoder boundary point, EPB, they've been available since 6.0, so I'm not going to talk about those now. If we look at the content thresholds, you can see we've greatly extended range of tests that you can do on the software probes, including things like audio loudness, phase detection, and MOS scoring. Basically, all the functionality that you've seen on the VB288 is available on the software probes. Notice also the timeline option. Until version 6.1, timeline was purely a VBC option. But now any individual software probe or appliance can monitor QoE and produce and then store a timeline. Let's make this a little bit smaller so we can get in everything we need to see. You'll recognize the VBC timeline here, but now, as I said, it's been completely contained within the probe. And you can use the calendar function to go back in time to see thumbnails and data that have been recorded in exactly the same way as you can with the VBC. As you can see on the audio graph, we're seeing an interruption about every 11 minutes or so. That's caused by the video file looping, that's all. Moving to the VBC, we've added the ability to better display ST2022-7 redundant streams. I don't have a live view of that, but I can show you a screen grab that shows you that at the top we have the combined stream, and then we have the primary and secondary streams below that, all drawn together in a single view. And you can see the respective micro timelines, which will aid in any analysis of 22-7 issues. So you've now seen an overview of 6.1. I think you'll agree that there are some really interesting features and they're going to be very useful in the future. It's just an overview. There are a couple of features like the login features and some of the security issues that I haven't really gone into. But you can look at the release notes to get full information on hardware and software requirements as usual. Well, thank you for your time, and I hope you've enjoyed this brief video on 6.1.